Okay, welcome to Doing It Right. You know what this podcast is about. It's about highlighting extraordinary people, leaders who have achieved success while staying true to their authentic selves and their core values. You know, this show is an extension of 25 years of my life devoted to coaching and empowering leaders. And it's a mission that's central to my company, which is leadership authenticity. That's what it's all about. I want my leaders to be real and show up just their best, but not try to be somebody they're not. As we proudly say on Valerie and Company website, quote, when who you are on the inside aligns authentically with how you show up on the outside, you unlock the power of your leadership. So I want to thank my subscribers. I want to thank those of you who are watching or listening today. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so. It means a great deal, especially in Google Juice. Okay? So today I have an extraordinary guest. And I'm so personally thrilled because as you can see these books, how many of you saw the Bourne Identity movie? How many of you have read about the Bourne Identity? Well, I have the author on today, so stay tuned.
Welcome to our podcast, Doing It Right. This podcast reveals authentic stories from successful leaders doing it right. It's about their journey to become a leader, their choices, motivations, and lessons. In essence, how they built successful personal brands. Your host is Valerie Sokolosky, author of 8 leadership books and nationally known as an authority on executive presence and personal branding. Let's get started. Here's Valerie.
Okay, my guest today is Brian Freeman, as you can well see in the screen. And guess what? One of my books fell, but that's okay. It's not about me today at all. Brian Freeman is the New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of more than, listen to this, 30 psychological thrillers. And I've been reading these for a long time. To think that I could have Brian on today, the man, more than thrills me and my heart. And so I want you to stay tuned for Brian Freeman. All right, Brian, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being on the show.
Well, Valerie, thank you so much. It's just a great pleasure to be with you today.
We're going to have fun. And you know, the irony, I got to thinking about this last night as I was writing my final show notes for today. The irony of your story is that, first of all, I started reading Robert Ludlum's books years ago when he first started, and you told me that you also have always been a huge fan of now the deceased Robert Ludlum, and you're the one, the man that is taking up the mantle to carry on this legacy. But Brian, what I loved about our conversation is that you said, I want to put my flair on Jason Bourne's character. So let's talk about this. What's your flair?
Well, you know, I have to tell you that I can remember reading The Bourne Identity for the very first time, literally more than 40 years ago. I would have been 17 years old back in 1980 when the book first came out, and it immediately became one of my all-time favorite thrillers. But boy, you know, if you had told me, you know, 4 decades earlier that you know, books would be coming out with my name and Robert Ludlum's name together on the cover, I would have thought you were crazy. But here we are, and it has been such an amazing honor for me to take over the Bourne franchise. And now I will say it's kind of intimidating. I mean, my first reaction when they told me that I got the gig was, you know, oh my God, and you know, then my second reaction was, oh my God, because yeah, there's a lot of pressure in stepping into the shoes of a giant like Ludlum and then into such an iconic franchise like Bourne. But what I told the folks at Putnam, what I really wanted to do was recreate the character from Ludlum's books, from the Bourne Identity in particular, very authentically. So it would feel like that Jason Bourne come back to life, but move him forward into an all-new modern setting with all new plots and characters around him that reflect what's going on in the world today. So that essentially it's a reboot of the entire series. You can actually read my take on Bourne and the 6 novels that I have out now from Bourne without having actually read any of the other books or even having seen any of the movies. And yet for those folks that are Ludlum fans like you and me, I think they'll feel like this is kind of bringing Ludlum back to life and bringing his original vision of Bourne back to life. That's what I've been trying to do.
Well, the word trying, forget that. You are doing it. So what does the new, current Jason Bourne feel like? Because I loved what you told me on our pre-call. You said that you try to feel the character. Just tell us about how you develop these characters. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's an interesting combination of factors when you're trying to step into someone else's shoes and bring their character to life. Ludlum had a very distinctive, propulsive, dramatic kind of prose style, and I think if you just tried to imitate that, it would feel like a caricature. I don't think it would work. So what I've tried to do is write in my style, in the Brian Freeman style, but let sort of echoes of Ludlum, filter into my prose. And I think what you get is kind of a hybrid of Robert Ludlum and Brian Freeman, and I think that really works. And I think the same thing is true of Bourne, the character. When I wrote my first Bourne novel, The Bourne Evolution, which was all the way back in 2019 that I was working on the book, I wrote that book as sort of a tribute to Ludlum and the Bourne Identity, and it really just kind of flowed off the computer keys. I was working on my second book, The Bourne Treachery, and it felt like it was going more slowly. It was like a more difficult writing process, and I finally realized that I kind of needed to give myself permission to take over the character. That Jason Bourne, was now not just a Robert Ludlum character, but a Ludlum Freeman character, and I needed to allow that character to grow and change and evolve based on the things that were happening to him in my books. And once I sort of allowed myself to do that and allowed myself to take sort of co-ownership of the character with Ludlum, then everything seemed to flow very smoothly.
Well, I would say yes, they flow very smoothly, and I can't put them down. I love the fact that I'm a page turner with your books, and not always. Sometimes I'm reading a book that I want to just go to the next chapter, but I can't do that with your books. And you talked about the fact, and here's, I think, the magic of you, that you were born to do this. Tell us about the 6th grade experience.
Yeah, people have asked, when did you first begin to think of yourself as a writer? And for me, I'm one of those people that I have never thought of myself as anything else. I've wanted to be a writer and write books for a living as far back as I can remember. I can remember sitting in 6th grade class working on my very first mystery novel, and it's just the way I'm wired. I see the world through the lens of storytelling. I can remember back when I was a little kid, and my parents had this little cottage in Michigan that I'd go on walks with my dad on the dirt roads past all the cornfields and the old farm buildings and things, and I'd be imagining what was going on behind the walls and what was happening, kind of all the secrets that were going on back there. It's just, that's always the way I've seen the world, and so that's been my dream as far back as I can remember. So the fact that I've been able to spend the last 20 years making a living as a thriller writer and writing now more than 30 novels, it really is a dream come true. And I think that you talk about leadership and stamina, and I spent a lot of time trying to break through. Publishing is a tough business, and I wrote actually 5 novels in my life before I even started in on the book that became Immoral, which was my breakthrough book. And boy, there were so many days when I was thinking, why am I banging my head against the door of this crazy business? But you have to have that determination. You have to have that belief in yourself. And I'm so grateful that I didn't give up on myself. I didn't give up on my dreams, because I would have missed such an amazing ride these past 2 decades.
And that's exactly one of your takeaways that you said you wanted to share, which is never give up. Never give up. Brian, when you wrote Immoral, talk to us about that book and how maybe that led to other things.
Yeah, my first novel, Immoral, this was the first in what became my Jonathan Stride series, which is based in Duluth, Minnesota. There are now 11 books in the Stride series. Of course, back then I didn't know what was going to happen. I'd written 5 books in my life. I'd sent off queries to agents and publishers, and they come back in just pristine condition, paperclip, not even moved. But I've always been a believer that things happen for a reason, and they happen in the time frame that they're supposed to. And so right around the time that I had the manuscript of Immoral kind of the way I wanted it to be, I find out quite by accident that someone I worked with at the organization I was working for was going to be going to a college alumni event with a woman who was an agent at one of London's largest literary agencies. And so I sprang into action, and she agreed to take a look at the book. And 1 week later, she sent me an email saying she'd stayed up till 1 a.m. finishing it, couldn't put it down, wanted to represent me. And within about the next 3 or 4 months, we had sold the rights to Immoral in 17 languages, and it had been selected as an International Book of the Month, main selection in the Literary Guild and the Book of the Month Club. It was just an amazing way to get started in the business after all those years.
The fortitude that you had and the focus, and you're so right. All of the attributes that it takes for you to write a book are the same attributes it takes to be a really good leader. So talk to us about just now in your high success. You are at the pinnacle, Brian. You're such a down-to-earth person, but I'm going to tell you, you're at the pinnacle. And at that pinnacle, what would you say to leadership just across the board? I don't care what kind of a leader you are. And, I always say, Brian, the janitors are leaders. Everybody's a leader. If somebody doesn't pick up their mantle and do something with it, then, why are we here? We all have purpose. What would you say to our audience who is made up of all kinds of business owners and entrepreneurs and curiosity people who just want to hear from fabulous, successful people like you? How do you know your purpose?
Yeah, I talk to so many aspiring writers, and they kind of ask, what's the secret, and how do you break through? How do you become successful in such a difficult business? And for me, I always tell them to go back to basics. I mean, my rule of thumb is that 100% of unwritten books have never been published. The bottom line is if you have a dream, if you see something in your future that you want to be, or that you want to do, or that you want to create, the bottom line is you have to take the steps to get there. And it doesn't matter whether you're working on your first novel or whether you're working on your 33rd novel. The challenges are the same. You still have to get up every morning and stare at that blank screen and bring something new to life. And life is such that every day there are a lot of other things that you could be doing, and there are a lot of distractions, and there's a lot of people and a lot of obstacles that will come up in your path and tell you that you can't do what you want to do, or that will kind of steer you off the path that you want to be on. And you have to get past those things, and you have to keep focused on going step by step and getting where you want to go, because the only person that's going to be able to make that happen is yourself. And there's all sorts of people that can provide help along the way, but again, the bottom line is it still gets back to what you want to accomplish. And for me, being a writer means I got to write books, and I have to get up every morning and kind of dig down deep and bring these characters to life.
So have you ever had writer's block?
I not really, only to the extent, I think one of the good things about taking a long time to break through and writing 5 books, before Immoral that went all the way back to when I was, 13 years old. That's when I I wrote my first full novel on Bic pen and on binder paper. And I think as a result of that, the idea of writing books never scared me because I'd done it multiple times in my life. And so when I had to do that for a living, I wasn't particularly intimidated at the idea of finishing books because that's kind of what I'd been doing my whole life. So it really is, it's not so much writer's block. You have to recognize that creativity comes and goes in waves. It's not a consistent kind of thing. And, I'll have what I call bad chapter days where, it just seems like things aren't coming, and you can spend all day working on particular passages, and you just feel like, this is never going to work. And of course, if you're a writer, this is a neurotic personality kind of business, and your immediate thought is, oh, well, that's it. We've had a good run, but all the inspiration's gone now. It's never coming back. And then you go to sleep and you wake up the next day and it's like, oh, that's what I was missing. And suddenly everything comes together again. So you don't stop, you don't let yourself stop, but you realize that it is not simply a smooth process, that inspiration, has to kind of drive itself forward. And frankly, that you also have to let the characters take shape. I mean, I always say that I don't like to take a lot of credit for the books that I write because in a lot of ways I feel like I'm more of the channeler or the scribe, and I'm just letting the characters, kind of tell their story through me. That's what I want the reader to feel.
That's so great that you talked about that, because I wanted to hear about how you, in your words, how do you feel those characters? I mean, your books are so intricate and they have so many twists and turns and characters, and Shears, I think something's going to happen. No, you push it over here. And so as a writer, and you're creating these intricate and complex characters, do any of them reflect anything about you?
Well, I think when you're a writer, kind of all of your characters have a little bit of you in them. And, for the people who have read my books, they should probably find that profoundly scary. But I think that what you really want to do is let the characters become three-dimensional and feel real and human. A lot of folks, particularly when it comes to like series books, will ask me, do I keep a file of notes and facts about, Jason Bourne or Jonathan Stride, so that I can kind of review the details that I've created about their lives. And I deliberately don't do that. I mean, maybe I should, because inevitably it means, you make mistakes about little details from time to time. But I never want my characters to feel like they're simply, two-dimensional lists of facts. I want them to be real and three-dimensional. I want them to come to life based on their kind of guiding me through the process, not based on me trying to, simply, pick off, particular facts about them from the past and use that to guide the characters. And honestly, that's the way real people are too. I mean, real people will get facts wrong about their own backgrounds because their memories are flawed. And of course, Jason Bourne knows a lot about that. But that's, so I want the characters to really feel three-dimensional, like they're folks that you could really meet. And I think that's when characters start to become a real part of readers' lives. And that's why readers want to keep going back and learning more about those characters.
Oh boy. And how many are on the plan now for this year, 2025 and beyond? Do you have I have to write this many every year? Tell me about, now that you're with this publisher, what's the expectation?
Yeah, they're keeping me hopping, no doubt about that. I wrote 3 books last year, and I've had to do that multiple times in the past decade. That's a lot.
Yes.
That's sort of not my preference, but the contracts are what they are, and one thing I've learned in this business, and I think it's something that successful folks always recognize, is that you don't say no to opportunities. I mean, the fact is, when an exciting opportunity is presented to you, you find a way to say yes. And so, when publishers are looking for books, I'm not looking at my schedule or my timeline. I'm looking at I'm excited about the opportunity to bring another book to life. So there will be 2 more Jason Bourne novels this year. The Bourne Vendetta just came out a couple of weeks ago, so that is my 6th Bourne novel, and then the Bourne Escape is already done. That'll be out in readers' hands July 29th, I believe it is. And then under my just my own name, I have a new psychological mystery called Photograph. Really interesting, intricate, emotional mystery. I love this book. That's going to be coming out either in September or October of this year. And then right now I'm already under contract for 2 more books this year. I'm writing another Bourne novel that will come out in January, and then my longtime series readers will be very excited because I'm finally getting back to Jonathan Stride. So I'll be writing the 12th Jonathan Stride novel this year, and that'll come out in 2026.
This just blows my mind. I mean, I just can't even, as you know, I'm an author too, but to me it was like giving birth to a child, which you wouldn't understand. But this is your gift. This is your gift. And something you mentioned just now about taking notes or whatever, you told me that memory is fleeting and to write things down. So what kinds of things seem to be those that you do need to write down for yourself? As an example, for me, if I get an idea, someone said, Valerie, you're like a popcorn popper. You get so many ideas, but the good thing is they fall in a bowl and they get eaten, which means I do something with them. But to my question, how do you take all of these things that must be floating around all the time in your mind and synthesize them down before you start writing again?
Yeah, the idea that memory is fleeting, I think that's an important concept. I obviously, Jason Bourne is a hero whose memory has been wiped out, and that shapes so much of who he is as a character. But if you look at my books, I have actually dealt with the theme of memory quite a lot in my novels. If you read my book, The Nightbird, it's all about the idea of memories being implanted. I have a book called I Remember You that is about someone waking up with someone else's memories in their head. So I've always been fascinated with the theme of memory, and maybe that's because I have such a terrible memory myself. I'm just really bad about that. So inevitably, it means I've got to write everything down, because otherwise I'm simply not going to be able to pick it all up. So it certainly happens regularly that I'll wake up at 1:30 or 2 in the morning, and I'll have ideas about a new book in my head, and I know that I have to get up and write it all down, because if I don't, by morning it'll be gone, and I'll never remember it. So
that's so true. That's so true. I have learned, and it's been said many times, keep a pen and paper by your bedside, because sometimes what is that about? I wonder you get some ideas out of the blue and you're asleep.
Yeah, it is strange. I mean, I've actually had when I'm in the process of plotting, which is always a very intense, stressful point of writing the book, where you're really kind of letting all of the threads come together. And I've literally had dreams where I remember a dream where I was getting into the back of a taxi cab in some city, and I was still in the taxi thinking through the plot issues that I'd been dealing with when I was awake. And a lot of ideas come to you overnight. The only question is whether any of them are any good. I think in one of the books, Jonathan Stride says that you really shouldn't listen to anything that comes to you in the middle of the night, because by the time you wake up in the morning, usually you realize there was nothing actually to worry about.
I'll take that. And you said it has to be fun. I think about everything you've said, which sounds like very much determination and grit and getting up and getting to the desk and all of that. But you're a fun guy.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about determination. I can remember back when I was applying for college, that one of the questions was that you had to use one one word to describe yourself. And both my mom and I came up with independently with exactly the same word, which was determined. And I've always felt that. I've always been, determined to make it in this business. But yeah, if you're not having fun, what are you doing it for? If it's drudgery, why are you pursuing that? When I took over the Bourne series, and it was, again, as I said, a very sort of intimidating process, a lot of pressure involved in the idea of putting my spin on this very iconic, famous series. And you can let the pressure get inside your head. And finally, what I did was the first two words that I put on my whiteboard were "have fun," just realize this is an amazing opportunity. The idea that here I am taking over this extraordinarily famous series, and that I get to write Jason Bourne novels. That's just amazing, and it's just fun. And so sure enough, I feel like writing the Bourne novels that has been as much fun as any writing project I've ever done. I've just thoroughly enjoyed the process of bringing Bourne back to life.
That's great. I want to go back to the book Immoral and your mother and the story you shared about that book when she was with her doctor at her doctor's appointment.
Oh yes, my poor mom. Here we are back in 2004, and I'd been waiting for years to finally be publishing a novel, and my mom had been waiting right there along with me, and here now it's finally going to happen after all these years. And what's the name of the book? Immoral. She was not particularly thrilled by that, but she didn't let it bother her. She kind of was out there becoming my marketer in chief, telling all her friends, "Oh, you've got to go out and buy my son's book." And so she told her doctor this at the clinic, and sure enough, her doctor bought a copy of Immoral and read it and loved it. But he wanted to make sure that he remembered to tell her this the next time she came in for an appointment. So he wrote Immoral on a Post-it note, put it in her file. So the next time my mom went to the clinic, she wound up seeing a different doctor who was looking at her very strangely the entire time. So the next time she saw her regular doctor, he comes into the office laughing. Apparently this other doctor had come to him after her appointment and said, "Why did you put that note in her file? She seems like such a nice woman."
I think that's great.
Yeah, we only had a couple of those salacious one-word titles, and I think my mom was the happiest about that. So.
Thank you for that story. Well, tell us another one. I loved your explanation of the policeman and how he picked up your book.
Oh yeah, you get wonderful notes from readers. That's one of the things I love about the business is all the great readers that I've heard from over the years. I had a terrific story. I think it was last year or the year before, from a retired police officer who'd been a fan for years, and he wrote to say, I don't think I've ever told you how I came to discover your books. And he said that he had actually worked in the town where Nelson DeMille, one of my own favorite authors, lived. And apparently one night an alarm went off in DeMille's house, and he was not home. And so the orders were that the police officers had to check inside the house to make sure everything was secure. And so there he is. He's going through DeMille's home, and he's in Nelson DeMille's bedroom. And there on DeMille's nightstand is a copy of Immoral. And so he figured, well, if it's good enough for Nelson DeMille, it's good enough for me. So he went out and got himself a copy of Immoral, and he'd been a fan ever since. So I thought that was great. I just love that.
And we love to hear stories from people who have read the books, or in my case, have watched the show, because if we don't hear from the people about what we do, then we feel like we're in a vacuum, like, well, is anyone watching or listening or reading? So those of you watching and listening, it's important. And I thank you for being so real. You and Marcia married 40 years, and you said, we just are who we are, and we now can see that. You're just as real as you can be. What is your brand? What is your brand? Who do you want to be,
that's a great question, because the reality is I've done a lot of different things with my books. I've got obviously the Bourne novels, which are action thrillers. I've got my 11 books in my Jonathan Stride series, which are kind of gritty, intricate police procedurals. I've got a number of sort of really interesting out there standalone novels. A couple of them that almost graze on the edge of sci-fi. Others that are very intricate, emotional, psychological mysteries, female first-person narrative. So, I think that readers never know what I'm going to do next, and it kind of makes it difficult to establish a brand, because I'm not sort of putting out different variations on the same theme every time. So I will always tell readers that I kind of want to be the Tom Hanks of the thriller world. Tom Hanks has done so many different roles over the years. You never know what he's going to do next, from Philadelphia through Forrest Gump, through Apollo 13. It's always very, very different characters. But that if Tom Hanks is in the movie, you see his name on the marquee, it's going to be a great movie experience. And I hope that readers feel the same way about my books, that when you see Brian Freeman's name on the cover, you don't necessarily know what kind of a book it's going to be, or where it's going to take you. But hopefully, if you see my name, you're going to get a great reading experience, and you're going to keep turning the pages till you get to the very end.
Well, boy, that's true. One last question. Which is your favorite book?
Oh, that's a good question. For years, readers would ask me, what's my favorite novel, and that's a tough one, because I love them all for different reasons and in different ways, and it's kind of like picking your favorite child. But I will say, a few years ago, I wrote a book called The Deep, Deep Snow, and then I followed that book up with a book called The Ursulina, and they're two very, very different books, and yet they fit together seamlessly. I almost consider them to be one creative project. And so The Deep, Deep Snow and The Ursulina, they're kind of the ultimate of what I want to accomplish in storytelling. They do exactly what I try to do, which is to get you intimately involved in the stories of the characters. And not only do you hopefully sort of gasp as you get to the twists at the end of the book, but also you find yourself, in tears because of how connected you feel to these people. I could pick up, the Deep, Deep Snow or the Ursulina right now and try to read you the last couple of pages from both of those books, and I wouldn't get through it. I'd be sobbing before I got to the end, and that's the level of emotional connection I want readers to have with my books.
Wow. You know what? I just have to say, you are totally gifted, and totally fulfilling what you were meant to do and be on this earth. And I want people to obviously share the wisdom you've given, but go out and look at all these different books, because there's not one that isn't going to be just a page turner. And sometimes I want to go back, because I feel like I've lost something. They're so intricate. So you are going to be involved intricately with the book when you pick up one of Brian's. And in the banner, Brian, it shows where people can get in touch with you, your website and Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I just want to thank you so very much for the opportunity to know the man that I am reading and will continue. Thank you for being on this show. Is there anything else you want to share before we head out today?
Well, thank you so much, Valerie. This has been a lot of fun, and I love the opportunity to talk to you and talk to your viewers as well. I just encourage folks, if they read my books and they enjoy them, get in touch with me, because I really do love hearing from readers, whether it's by email or on social media. That's a big part of the writing experience for me, is knowing how the books have touched readers' lives.
Well, once again, that's just the real person that you are. And it's so true. If we do something that's out there, we want to know if it's making a difference to those who are out there. So I encourage all of you who are listening or watching to do just that, to get in touch with Brian. And Brian, stay tuned, because I always leave with my kind of little psychological thought for today. And here's what it is. We talked about this, when someone says you can't, just watch. That's what happened to you. That's what happened to me. And I will never forget a woman saying, if you don't get further education at this university, you won't make it. And you know what? That just, and I said, well, just watch. And that's what I'm saying to the audience. Don't ever let anybody tell you you can't. Just say, well, just watch. And in closing, I want to say genuinely how much I appreciate every one of those of you who have subscribed to this channel and continue to watch. If you haven't, please do so. And those of you who send comments in, like Brian said, it makes a difference, and I answer every one of them. So let's keep this rolling. If you like what you're seeing and hearing, let me know. It matters. And for now, just stay authentic, real, and keep doing your magic. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening. To receive Valerie's voice, free monthly leadership tips, and to learn more about her leadership programs and coaching, visit her website, valerieandcompany.com. Next week, we'll be here again to inspire, engage, and equip you with teachable points of view from successful leaders who have been doing it right. Until then, lead authentically.